Hello, I'm Nido Qubein. Welcome to Conversations with North Carolina's most influential leaders, appearing on the Power List presented by Business North Carolina. Kirk Bradley, welcome to this program. I'm delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, Nido. I'm glad to be here. Excited to talk to you today.
Well, you know, you're the chairman, CEO, and president of Lee Moore, and you are known across the state as one of the greatest developers that we've ever had, what with Governor's Club Corporation and other developments we want to talk about. But I got to begin by asking you a question. You grew up in Georgia, even though your family is from North Carolina.
That's correct. Yes.
Sanford area in North Carolina.
That's right, Central North Carolina.
And then they moved to Georgia.
Yep, my mom and dad moved right before I was born.
And you grew up in Georgia.
Yes.
But you went to East Carolina. You wanted to be a music major.
Yeah, that was my early passion. I was a trumpet player and enjoyed it and got the opportunity, got a partial scholarship to be a music major at East Carolina, but didn't. I'm a quick study apparently and realized that I was better at other things than music and transferred to the University of Georgia.
So you went to East Carolina, University of Georgia. You came back to Duke University to get your MBA. And now you're on the board of governors of the University of North Carolina University System. Unbelievable. What's up with all that?
Well, higher education's been important to our family. It's important to the state of North Carolina, very involved in economic development, and the university system is one of the competitive advantages that the state of North Carolina has.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You still play the trumpet?
No, not enough time a day. When I was playing, I played six plus hours a day between practice and ensembles, and I don't have 6 hours a day to practice anymore.
Yeah, you gave it up then.
Yes, sir.
Look, I read somewhere where, and this is a sort of a tough question to ask you, but I read somewhere that on her way to your high school graduation, your grandmother died.
Grandfather
died.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he was literally on his way to attend your graduation?
That's correct, yes.
When did you find out about that?
Probably 2 days before I graduated. My grandmother was from Alabama, and they had gone down to visit her family, and they were coming back to Marietta to attend the graduation. And my grandmother called and told me he had passed. I was really close to him. He was the founder of Lee Moore Capital Company, yeah. Lee Moore Oil Company then, and so it was a big blow.
Yeah, yeah. Why is the company called Lee Moore Capital?
So when my grandfather started the company, and he was the sweat equity partner, by the way, he had a financial partner that they bought out in the 50s after he passed. But Sanford is in Lee County, Pinehurst is in Moore County, and so those were the two counties that we operated in. What's
the biggest project you guys are working on right now?
Well, we've got several industrial projects that are related to the mega sites and supporting projects, but the biggest thing we're working on is Mosaic, which is the sort of gateway to Chatham Park, the new 8,500 acre project that's being created around Pittsburgh. We're doing a 750,000 square foot mixed use urban burb, 1 to 6 story building. So that's going to be kind of part of the heart of the new project, Chatham Park.
Educate me, if you will. What are the fundamentals that you look at when you do a project? I mean, I understand probably location, demand, etc. But when you sit around that strategic table trying to make up your mind if you're going to invest that kind of money, what are the 2 or 3 fundamentals you look at? What makes you say yes to this project and no to that one?
It's a variety of factors, as you said. I mean, real estate is a team sport. There's a lot of elements and people that are involved in it. It always involves some element of public as well as private sector elements. So that's what we look at is the community receptive to it? Does it need it? We've tended to operate in areas and created new markets versus going into downtown Raleigh or downtown Charlotte. We feel like we have a competitive advantage being in urbanizing communities, helping them grow, much like what you did here in High Point. I mean, High Point's a great city, but it had some challenges. You know, what you've done with the university, we like to do that too. We like to do projects that are going to allow us not only to be successful as a real estate enterprise, but also to make our communities better places to live, work, play, and learn.
I really want to understand what goes into your psyche when you make those decisions and how you measure success thereafter. What are those principles that you look at? What are the metrics you look at besides profit?
Well, it's a variety of factors. I think the biggest thing that I would say that we like to do is to make sure that we are doing things that are going to be additive to the community. When we've left, Governor's Club's a good example of that. I got started that with my uncle. I was 25.
That was in the 80s sometime?
That was late 1988. We had wound up assembling over time about 2,000 acres, so it's both a private golf course and country club community, and outside of the gate we have apartments, we have retail, other homes that we developed. And you know, when we did that, ultimately it's $1 billion, and it has really had a positive impact on Chatham County in terms of tax base and bringing people to the community. We brought a lot of people to the community that volunteer, they're active. If you look at most of the nonprofit boards in Chatham County, there's people that live at Governor's Club that are involved in these things, trying to make the community a better place. That's kind of how we measure it. You know, obviously there's always the economics of doing real estate. We want to be successful. We want to make sure that our investors get a good return, but we're looking to do things that are going to be additive to make the community a better place, because we tend to develop where we live. It's one thing if you just do apartments and you're doing all over the southeast or the country, you're in and out with your project. You know, we live there, so we have to not make mistakes, much like you've done here. I mean, you have to make sure that you're doing something that is going to make the community a better place. That's very important to us.
And you have reputational capital to protect.
Absolutely.
Your family, your history, your legacy. Do you have any project that did not meet your expectations? And if so, how did you deal with that?
There's been plenty, you know, things that didn't work out. Real estate timing, there's external factors that affect you. We're in a high interest rate environment right now. That makes real estate tough, high cost. So we've had things that didn't quite work out. Sometimes you make a decision to build something for a tenant and they have problems that you couldn't foresee, or they hid them from you. And so we've had a few of those. So what we've learned is to make sure that we try and cover all the risks that we can and put ourselves in a position, if there's an unknown, that it's not going to take everything down. You know, we can absorb the loss, learn from it, and make sure we don't do that the next time.
What's the worst thing that can happen, and how will we deal with it? But of course, you take risk out of life, you take opportunity out of life.
Absolutely.
And North Carolina, as a state, is known from border to border and coast to coast as a land of opportunity. People want to come live here. They like our climate. They like our political terrain. They like our business environment. Certainly you have done significant study on that. You understand why these mega sites are working, why we've grown in population and more. What is your view of all of that? And give us sort of your perspective about what you see the next decade or next 2 decades in the Tar Heel State.
I'm very excited for the next 20 years. I think what's happened with our business climate from a political standpoint, as you mentioned, our university and community college system, the military that we have, exiting military as a potential workforce. We have all the ingredients to be the biggest growth engine in the country here. We have expertise in life sciences, defense, ag tech. We can be the Silicon Valley of ag tech here, and many other things, power electronics. And so all those things come together, and you look at, and you kind of see that in the microcosm of these recent projects that we've gotten with Wolfspeed, VinFast, the Toyota battery plant. All of these are terrific future industries for our country and the world. And then you look at the life sciences and gene therapy manufacturing. Surprisingly, Sanford, North Carolina is now the global center for excellence for gene therapy manufacturing, which is the future of medicine and life science and pharma companies. And so you take all of those future industries and they're right here. So we've got to train the workforce, we've got to bring in people that already have that expertise, and I think the upside for North Carolina is unlimited.
What are some of the obstacles or challenges that you see that lie before us? For example, is our highway system what it needs to be? Is our railway system what it needs to be? Are airports big enough to accommodate people's transportation? What is it that you see as things we must do in North Carolina to ensure that the next 2 decades, as you said, are truly as prosperous as they can be?
I would say it's workforce. we've got to have people educating themselves, both whether they're 18 to 24, which is High Point University's target market, or they're those people that need to change careers and adapt to these new industries. We've got to figure out how to take everybody. It's lifelong learning. And so we've got to have systems, be it community college or flexibility in our universities with certificate programs and other educational attainment that allow us to have the workforce we need. I think that's the biggest thing that I see that we've got to have and take advantage of. And it's a challenge. It's not going to be easy, but if we can master that, we'll have a competitive advantage over not only the rest of the United States, but the world.
And when you talk about workforce, you're not just talking about people working in a factory. It used to be textile, furniture, etc. You're also talking about people who are versed in technology, for example, right? And so that's middle of the road and more, which brings higher wages, more economic infusion in the state and more. I mean, I look at Charlotte, Kirk. I look at the development of Charlotte. I look at the development in the Raleigh, triangle. I look at the triad here, Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem. So many opportunities, and some have done it better than others. What is that? What is that delta? What is that factor that causes some to do better than others?
Readiness. That's where the public comes in. You've got to have a good inner working between the public and private to make sure that your community is ready. That's what we've been able to do in Lee and Chatham County. That's why we're starting to have success. Companies today need to be able to when they make a decision to locate somewhere, they need to be able to produce whatever they're planning to produce in 18 months or less. To do that, you have to have sites that are ready. That takes some public commitment as well as private commitment. And so if you look at the communities that are having success, they have that infrastructure in place. And so I think that's a very important, that's when you look at, be it Charlotte or the Triangle or the Triad, that's why we're successful. It's funny, these both Chatham Park as well as the two mega sites in Chatham, and to a lesser extent, it wasn't quite as old as this, the Greensboro Randolph mega site where Toyota's going. Those are 17-year overnight successes. They didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of planning and assembly, working public and private. But I think we've all begun to learn how that works together. And once we get that going, that momentum, it's like the flywheel and good to great. You start spinning and it does better and better and better.
Bobby Long, Don Flo, and I are the co-chairs of the Piedmont Ride Partnership, so I know once you speak, I understand what you just said. We've talked about this mega site business for what seems like eternity, but I'm glad to see it happening. The Toyota executives are actually coming to our campus to hold a strategic planning meeting. I look forward to talking to them. I look forward to asking them some serious questions. What is it that pleased them so far about North Carolina? Hence, they've come here to build a big operation. And what is it that we need to do? Workforce preparedness, but what else that we need to do to make the environment truly great? As you know, Kirk, we've lost some corporate headquarters in North Carolina as well. We've lost them here from Greensboro, we've lost them from Winston-Salem, although sometimes they move in another city in North Carolina. But we need to build significant operations if we are to increase the tax base, create more jobs, improve people's economic clot, and more. And you mentioned the university system and community colleges, of course the 35 private schools in North Carolina also producing a lot of talent. What is it that's missing in all of that? Is it funding? Is it focus? What is it that's missing that's keeping us from really having this workforce available for many more Toyotas and many more supersonic and many more technology companies in the Triangle and Sanford and other places?
That's a great question. I think there is certain infrastructure that is missing. Funding is a part of that, but it's also a mindset that what is our mission? Mission, vision, values. Those are always the things that make, if you look at successful enterprises, be it a university, a town, or a private enterprise, and they are having success. If you go back and look at that, it is they sort of define their mission, vision, and values, and they got out. And we have not quite pulled that all together. And I will say another concern I have.
We have not pulled it together as a state,
as
you mean?
As a state, yes. Yeah. And it's, it's coming together, and we're starting to see that, but there's not as rigorous. You know, the military is very good at after action. You know, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? And we tend to say, we won, you know, and you know, it's great to win. I'm all for winning, but sometimes you win by accident, sometimes you win by design. I like winning by design because then you can repeat it and sustain it. And that's really what you're talking about here with the workforce. And so I think it's a combination of getting elected leaders as well as private business and industry and other citizens and stakeholders to kind of understand what we need to do. I'm very concerned about our rural areas. You know, we have 100 counties, 51 of them lost population. I want to find the kind of economic development that allows us to grow out from the three urban areas that you talked about and push things into those other counties so that we get the counties east of 95 and west of 77 growing at least an approximate rate of what we can do. Obviously, the cities are always going to have advantages, and those need to do what they're doing. But if they're doing well with a conscious strategy, we can grow our rural areas as well.
And that's about transportation. That's about accessibility, right? That's about education, letting companies know that there's a lot of people there. You know, when I think about things like medical access in the rural areas, would you agree with me that we're a little bit behind on some of those areas? It's hard to get doctors, for example, to go into the rural areas of North Carolina. Am I right or wrong?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a very difficult thing. A lot of the schools, I know that UNC Pembroke has a program, and UNC Wilmington. If you can educate, at least in the allied health, not necessarily all the way up to MDs, but if you can educate nurses and nurse practitioners and physician's assistants in those areas, they tend to stay. The people like where they're from. They just need to have the opportunity. So I think those are things that we need to try and work on. And medical, you know, telemedicine helps because you can get the specialized expertise a little bit better into rural areas now, but you still need to have boots on the ground.
So life quality, right?
Yes.
Everybody wants quality of life and access to health care and education and all the rest. So you've been on the Board of Governors of the University of North Carolina system now for what, a year? So?
Yeah.
For a year. To the extent that you feel comfortable to tell me what works, what doesn't work. I mean, we read stuff about stuff that works, and we read stuff that sort of makes you wonder if there's agreement around that table or disagreement around that table. Give me some inside info. You won't get in trouble, I promise.
Well, I would say first and foremost, you have to have a great leader, and President Hans is terrific. Peter Hans was, I think, born and spent most of his career, not necessarily knew that, to become president of the university system. So he's perfect, and that makes a great leader. I think Randy Ramsey, who's the chair, is doing a great job of bringing all the other 23 of us, there's 24 people on the board, together in sort of a structural way that's positive. I think, you know, board work, you're on a lot of boards, you know how this is. There needs to be, you can have disagreement, but there needs to be a way to resolve that disagreement over specific issues without having that go all the way through. And I think the board's had some challenges over time, and most of those have gotten resolved. So we're very focused. I mentioned to you we've got 93 million square feet. We've got a lot of deferred maintenance. Fortunately, the General Assembly and the budget in December 21 funded a lot of that, or at least a start on bringing that current. And so we're, you know, Peter and his team are doing great things. At the individual campus level, great chancellors like yourself as a president make great universities. Having longevity, strategic planning, these things take a while, and those campuses that get good leaders make a difference. I feel good about all of our chancellors. We've got some chancellors that are nearing the end of their careers, and so there'll be challenges to make sure that we bring in the next leader that is going to be equally as good and move those universities and campuses forward. So that's no real secrets. It's all out there. So
how is the board? How is the board selected? It's appointed some by the legislature, or what else?
It's 100% appointed by the General Assembly.
100%.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so Kirk, as you look forward, look out the next decade. You've already said that you are very optimistic about the future of the Star Hill State as we look the next decade or two and beyond. What is it that excites you the most, beyond growth, beyond companies moving here? What is it about North Carolina that you believe gives it this enormous edge?
Well, we're a microcosm of everything. We've got rivers, we've got ocean, we've got mountains, we've got Piedmont, we've got agriculture, industry, banking, finance. You know, we have all the elements.
We're the second largest financial capital in the country.
Absolutely.
Other than New York and Charlotte.
So we have all these elements, and I'm excited that we're now getting our due nationally and globally. I think elements of North Carolina have been recognized over time, but the cohesive nature that you and I both know of all of these sort of disparate things that make it great to work, live, and learn here and play here. We are getting more of that. We need more of those people. We need some of our folks to come home. You know, people that have been educated at our great private and public universities and have had to go other places for jobs. We have those jobs today, so come back. We want to increase our market share. We want our graduates to stay here. And whether they've gone to a public or a private university or a community college, we want them. We as leaders should make sure that we have the jobs to make sure that all of our citizens, current and future, have the opportunities that they and their families need. And I think we have the elements to produce that, and I'm excited for the future.
The population of North Carolina is what, 11 million, 12 million?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Ninth largest, yeah.
How many more people do you think we can accommodate in the state without highways becoming a bigger problem, without healthcare becoming more difficult? What is your personal opinion?
There's always problems to solve. I think the biggest thing is people need to accept density. People say they don't want urban sprawl, but then when you try and do a dense development, they resist that. And so elected officials have got to understand that we've got to encourage more density, which allows things like mass transit. I don't ever think we're going to have certain elements of rail, but like in our metro areas, we need to be working on bus mass transit. That makes sense. We're still too spread out and always will be, but I think we can accommodate, who knows, 5, 10 million people. We can be, you know, we can.
You think we can double in population?
Yes, but we need to be mindful that if we're going to double in population, that we're ready. Yeah. We have the design and development, encourage the kinds of things that allow that to not diminish this great quality of life we already have.
So you've said to me that the state has to look forward, have a future view, and sit around and say, what is our strategy? How much do we want to grow? What must we need? Whose job is that?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure.
I mean, you said public and private, I get all that, but specifically, who's going to be sitting in that driver's seat and say, you and you and you and you and you, sit around the table and let's talk turkey?
We've got to have great conveners. I think our university leaders can do that. I think Piedmont Triad Partnership is a good example. Obviously, our chief executive, which is our governor, needs to do that. I think our General Assembly leaders, Senator Berger and Speaker Moore, need to be a part of that. And, you know, I think it's up to whoever wants to go forward, but we've got to convene the right stakeholders and get everybody focused on that same mission, vision, values. Who sets that? I don't know. I guess it's a collective, and I think the opportunity is right for someone to step up there. I know you're involved in economic development, and I get very frustrated because we've had a lot of success, but I don't think our economic development infrastructure is anywhere near what it should be for North Carolina to reach its potential, and so we'll see what happens with that.
And this is the time.
Absolutely.
We're experiencing success. We're about to bust in the state in all kinds of good ways. You know, it frustrates me in the local level and sometimes on the statewide level how we have so many organizations, each doing excellent work, each is committed highly to the cause, but we don't come together and bear, you know, just tear down the barriers and say, let's march on together and make something happen. And someone's got to make that happen.
I agree.
And it takes a lot of power in the state. You know that in the Triad area, we now refer to the whole corridor from Winston-Salem on to Sanford and Fayetteville as the Carolina Core. What is your view of the name, and what is your view of someone carving that and calling it Carolina Core?
Well, I was involved in some of that with Stan Kelly and you and the others, and so I think Carolina Core is a great name. When you think that from Winston-Salem to Fayetteville, we've got all the things we talked about. Great places to live and work, great workforce between the military, Our universities are well represented in that. We have the land that's set aside, and think that you have boom, supersonic on one end, and silicon chips and another, and electric vehicles all through that. I think it's a perfect name, and it was a good name when we didn't know any of those were coming.
Yes.
I think it's still a good name, but I think that's kind of what you were talking about, that we've got to figure out a way to work. People don't care where the county line is. I mean, we need borders, and we have to have those sort of things, but most people don't care whether they're in Lee or Chatham County, as long as what they need for their company is in the right place.
And their families.
And their
provide
families.
for their families a secure and prosperous future. I can't end this interview without telling you that I'm impressed with you on so many levels. You're an entrepreneur because you come from an entrepreneurial family. Things could have been much worse. You could be a trumpet player today.
That's right. Well,
but instead
maybe,
you became this extraordinary developer of very fine projects that will enhance the state and help the people in it. But you're also intensely interested in the environment. And I read a lot about your concerns about environmental matters, environmental initiatives. I saw somewhere where you are also involved in the American Battlefield Trust?
American Battlefield Trust.
What is that?
So American Battlefield Trust works to save Revolutionary War, War of 1812, and Civil War battlefields. We think those are outdoor classrooms. It's very important for people to understand the origin story. You talk about High Point University being God and country university, and I think if you don't understand our history, you understand it. So preserving these places and allowing current future citizens to go out there and stand and understand why people are willing to fight and die to create and sustain our country. Because if you take those three wars, that's the Declaration of Independence, the War of 1812, ratified the Constitution, and then obviously Emancipation Proclamation, what happened with the Civil War. And those are all very important foundational elements. So I spent almost 20 years on that board, and I think we did a lot of great work for our country.
And we appreciate you doing that. You know, we not only need to know history, but we need to learn from history so that we can be prepared for a better future, all of us. Talking about the environment, it is kind of unusual for a commercial developer as you are to be interested in an environmental matter. Am I wrong on that?
It does seem a little bit oxymoronic, for sure.
Yeah. Tell me what is it you believe we ought to do to keep those two in an equilibrium, in balance, care about the environment, our future. At the same time, we must develop our communities, and we must develop, commercially and otherwise, to accommodate the growth in the state of North Carolina.
So I think to me, they fit together, because if you're a good steward of the environment, you're able to sustain the quality of life. It's a balancing act, and clearly when you're developing property, you're grading, you're putting the environment a little bit at risk, and that's a risk you have to take, but it's a calculated risk. I think some of my environmental friends don't understand that. They want to leave everything as nature, but you can't accommodate the growth that we're going to have. So you're better to be proactive. So we're all about that. Chatham Park is an excellent example of that. Have several things that are well above the current standards in terms of stormwater. We're bringing back bee populations. We're putting pollinator gardens in our plantings as part of our requirements. So hopefully we'll bring more and more bees have been under duress, and that's an important element for our food supply. So I think there's things you can do when you're working at scale and trying to make sense. But I think they do go hand in hand. I wouldn't necessarily always agree with some of my environmental friends on how we approach that, because you have to put the environment somewhat under risk when you're developing new projects, buildings like you do here. But you can be mindful of that and do the best you can, deal with the rain events, and make repairs as necessary.
And change can be painful, but without change, we would never transform anything.
Absolutely.
So we all have to calibrate our thinking and collaborate in our decision making. What lies ahead for you?
Just trying to make North Carolina a better place, look after my family. Got our first grandchild, so I'm excited about that. But when I first started at the company, I dropped my keys and I looked under the couch in the office there, and I was pulling out. I saw these picture frames, And I pulled them out. My uncle had apparently done this sometime before, and it was a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and it said, the use of money is the only use there is in having money. And so whether that's used for a philanthropic intent, economic development, or for private enterprise, and so I enjoy doing that. It's a passion of mine, and that's kind of what I think my future is going to be about.
That's awesome. You know, any organization, any city, any community, and any state, to be truly ready for the future must have leaders like you who care deeply about it and who invest themselves in every way to make it happen. And you are doing that in North Carolina. We thank you for that, and I'm delighted that you were with me today, Kirk Bradley, on this program. Thank you, sir, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.